From the National Christian Foundation in San Diego, I'm Kim Muller, and this is the Generous Girl Podcast, a show that shares inspirational stories about generosity through faith, family, finances, fitness, and friendships, as well as deep thoughts about what matters most and practical tips. My guests are all amazing women who have overcome adversity and are big believers in hope and in maximizing their time, their talents, and their treasures, and making their lives count. So we're so happy that you're here. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time. Hi, welcome to the Generous Girl Podcast. I am thrilled today to get to welcome my very good friend for many years named Dee Eastman. Welcome, Dee. It's so great to have you from your beautiful house in Dana Point, California.
Well, hi, Kim. I'm so happy to be with you today. It's an honor.
It is. You've always been a hero of mine, and we'll be able to get into why I think of you as just a top hero in my life. Wow. But as everyone knows, with this podcast, we like to spotlight 5 different areas of the generous girl. Someone who lives generously in the areas of faith, family, fitness, friendships, and finance. And just knowing you all these years, a mom of 5 kids, I feel like you exemplify living generously, and there are a variety of reasons for why. But I think of you in the area of really 2 of those 5 areas: faith, and how your faith has carried you through a lot of hills and valleys, but also fitness. And I think you've got quite the story to tell, how fitness has just helped you, energized you, and really helped take care of your soul through a lot of different challenges and adversity that you've faced. So that's why I just thought you're a perfect person to interview. So I feel selfishly like I know all about you, and I want the world to be able to know your story. And that's why you're here today. And that's why I felt like Dee Eastman has to be on this podcast. So here we go.
Well, just thank you so much. It's so fun, I think, as women to come together and just share our stories.
I agree.
It's so nice just to have, I have felt so supported by you and our friend group all these years, and we've weathered the highs and lows and given each other support and pointers and tools and tips for the journey, right? We all need it. I love that your podcast is about the generous girl and these 5 pillars that really exemplify a generous life. And so it's fun for me to be able to be on and enjoy talking to you about it.
Well, we have journeyed together, and it's been a very special journey. And I think all of us in this friend group have felt like we needed community and we needed each other in addition to our families and spouses and children. And let's start with you telling a little bit to the listeners about your own story. Where did you grow up? Where did you meet your spouse? Where have you lived? What states?
Yes. So we were both born in Northern Cal, my husband and I. We met each other way back when we were in high school, I think at 14. I had a crush on him an entire year, and he finally asked me out junior year to the junior prom. So we've been dating forever. It's like we just had our 40th wedding anniversary. Just this last summer. I'm thinking, that was a lifetime ago. Yes. And we have, in the first decade of our marriage, we gave birth to 5 beautiful children. We have Josh, who is now 35. Brianna is 32. And then we have identical triplet girls. They are 30 years old. We have Megan, Michelle, and Melody. So that's a little bit about us. It was quite a surprise when we had Josh that was 3.5 and Bree that wasn't even a year. And we found out that we were pregnant by surprise. And then the real surprise came at 5 months, because we were so backward back then medically, right? It wasn't until 5 months that I found out I did not have 1 child, I didn't have 2, that I had 3. And they ended up being identical triplet girls.
And I remember no special fertility drugs or anything going on, and nothing genetically in your background. Just one of those stories where we're pregnant with triplets.
We knew God had a sense of humor. We had a really steady ministry that we had been involved in. My husband was in seminary, a church that we had been involved in for like a decade. And we decided for a year to leave town and go do an internship for church planters in the Midwest. We were going to get mentored and soak it all in. And that is when the triplets decided to come and grace our lives. We went from a family of 2 kids to 5 during the internship. And our life was forever transformed, obviously.
Yes. And I know your dear mom, who we called Marie, is no longer here on earth with us, but I remember her being a saint and literally moving to the Midwest to help you and to help you initially in those times.
Yes, she's 100% Italian, and she was the Italian, the epitome of the best Italian grandmother we all could have imagined for. She moved in, she bought the freezer in the garage, she cooked and held babies and rocked and fed to our heart's delight. And I don't think we would have made it through that season without her, right?
Right. And I mean, for those who don't know you, like, how tall are you?
Oh, 5'3".
5'3". So you're this tiny little thing who is pregnant with triplets. And I mean, and again, if someone saw you today walking on the street, you look like you're, 25 years old, and your triplets are now 30, right?
Yeah, triplets are 30, Bree's 32, and Josh is 35. Yeah, and back in the day, Bree is only 15 months older than the triplets. So I really had a quadruplet stroller. I had 4 in diapers. People will say like, oh, what were their milestones for like sitting and crawling and this and that? I'm like, oh my gosh, I was so sleep deprived the whole first year. I have no recollection. Like, let's look back at the medical records. Mom was like in a state of like, wow, just one foot in front of another, right?
Right. Okay, I love that you just said that, because that really is really a focus of this podcast. And years ago, for those who don't know you and me and several of our friends, we led a women's study at Saddleback Church in Southern California called The Journey. Mm-hmm. And we had a hiking boot on every table. And we were very fortunate to be under the leadership of Rick and Kay Warren, who were very transparent, very vulnerable from the pulpit or from the platform as they taught. And we really tried to emulate and model after that. And what we tried to do with the 5 of us was to encourage women to take the next step, whatever that was. Whether you're listening to this podcast and you've got the newborn and you're sleep deprived, or you have triplets, or wherever you are, or maybe you're at the other end of the spectrum and dealing with elderly parents and just a full-time caregiving job that way. The purpose of this podcast is to hear stories such as Dee's, and in your own life, ask yourself, okay, what is that one new step that God's wanted me to take that I can take? And, as we explore more of the area of fitness, maybe it's drinking an extra glass of water a day, something simple. Like, it's not, oh, let me try to run a marathon tomorrow, but we want this podcast to encourage every listener so that wherever God has them on their journey, they feel inspired to take that next step.
Yeah, and for me in those beginning days, there was just so much of a juggle happening initially, but then when the triplets got to be about 8 months old, they were born very premature and in the neonatal about 2.5 months. So we thought everything was fine, that they just needed to grow and get bigger. They were born so little, 1.5, 2, and 2.5 pounds. But when they got to be around 8 months old, we really saw some differentness with Megan. She was really tight in the neck. She would often look up. She wasn't moving quite as easily. And a physical therapist came over and said, I think Megan might have cerebral palsy. At the time, I had never heard of cerebral palsy. I'm like, well, what implication would that be? And they said, well, she may never walk or talk. Like, doctors didn't let me know. They were born so early. There was just a lot of, it was super unclear how everything was going to go. And my husband wasn't there. And I couldn't imagine a life with my daughter not walking or not talking. And we did medical tests. We went to see a neurologist, did all the MRIs, and found out that Megan did have cerebral palsy. And then Michelle was a little delayed in her motor development. And they said, we need about another year to know if these are just typical delays or if Michelle has cerebral palsy as well. So at 1.5, we found out that Megan had very severe cerebral palsy, very involved with her motor ability to move. And Michelle was more mildly involved, and the Melody was fine. So I think the hardest part in those beginning days was getting this medical diagnosis.
Mm-hmm.
We were on a trajectory to plant a church back in Southern California. Our church there in the Midwest said, God is clearly redefining this season of one that needs just a lot of attention on your family.
Right.
And so whatever was a dream, we needed to look for a new dream and to
Mm-hmm.
seek God for a different path than we had initially thought. So we stayed in the Midwest for 5 years just to get some family stability.
Mm-hmm.
And then I was ready for some sunshine. I was ready to come back to my sunshine state of California with all these little ones. And we moved back to Southern California. And that's where, Kim, you and I connected at Saddleback Church. My husband was on staff there and had all these babies. And so many things started to get into a rhythm. But then we did hit a season when they were in elementary school where there was some intense medical issues that came up. And it brought this new family stress. And it was just the stress upon stress, how to deal with it. My husband and I, not always looking at the same way, feeling stretched so thin that I went from being a really thriving person with you, leading the journey, writing curriculum, teaching. I ran a marathon the year before. I was at the epitome of doing well. And after a series of stressors, it was interesting how the stressors just impacted my health. Mm-hmm. I initially got some digestive issues. The digestive issues compounded. I didn't understand about gut microbiome at the time and how that can impact your mood, but then it impacted my mood, my energy, my motivation. So the year prior, I went from being a person that was really flourishing to fast forward a year with a lot of stress. And I felt like, oh my gosh, I am barely handling my life. Right. And I couldn't get my stomach to clear up. I couldn't get my mood to elevate. And I really needed to look for some new answers.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I remember that even one thing at that time, wasn't it some doctor connected you with even that healthy soup recipe that you made? And that was kind of like a starting point that changed.
Yeah, I literally just did I had tried a couple detoxes with a chiropractor that didn't work. And then I ended up finding another holistic doctor and I did a detox and my stomach started clearing up. And then I went to a functional medicine doctor and they said, well, I think if you're not going to go back out and run a marathon. So I had stopped working out. But they said, if you just start with some daily walking. So I think what they started to do was the stomach cleared up. And then they started giving me these small incremental steps to get better. But within a 6-month period, and I had support. I had the support of family, of friends, of a functional medicine doctor, of another doctor that helped with the detox. My health started rebuilding. And I think my whole background is in health science. It's what I've loved and what the field I've worked in. But I radically saw how stress can significantly impact health for the negative. And these small intentional steps can start to rebuild health and even transform health. And I experienced it myself. So within 6 to 8 months, I was back to walking. And then I could do other fitness activities. Like you and I ran a half marathon together.
Yes, you did. You were my encouragement. I mean, I was just happy I finished. Let's just say that.
Me too. I was just always happy when I finished every time. But I think for those that are listening, maybe your stress was different than mine. But we all have unexpected curveballs, unexpected Ys in the rows that we don't think are going to happen. They do. And sometimes it's like we hit the ground flat-footed and it's difficult and it's hard. And maybe it's experiencing anxiety and depression, or maybe a chronic health issue, or maybe just not feeling the resilience that we really want to have to cultivate in giving back in life to our family, to our friends, to ministry, to our community. Whatever it is, we all, I think, as women can say, yes, I've been there. I understand what stress like that feels like. And so I think probably my biggest encouragement is during those moments to know that small intentional steps really add up.
Right.
And just consistently doing that in the environment of supportive friends. And of course, fitness played a really big role. My faith played a really big role. And I think almost looking at healing as a puzzle piece approach, that you can look at your 5 pillars of a generous life and to see how they all work together for the good. Right. They all build a more balanced life, a more energized life, a more revitalized life, so we can be a generous giver in all areas of our life.
That's really well said. And I think of you, Dee, even listening to you now, And if you had seen this version of yourself when you got the diagnosis with your triplets having cerebral palsy, like I'm sure you probably couldn't have even foreseen what would come about, and the new people you would meet, the experiences. Just for our listeners, this past Saturday, Dee's oldest daughter is expecting Dee's first grandchild. So I was at her baby shower, and it just brought tears to my eyes to just look at this beautiful group of people. And those were all the people that had really journeyed along with Dee and her family through these years and decades. And the daughter that is in a wheelchair was just so adorable and is always so beautiful. And just her way of just being the cheerleader and just, her outbursts of encouragement during the shower, and just so, so cute. And, it's not like we would have written the script, and yet how God has just made a beautiful situation through some very, challenging things. But like, even talk about, when I think about you as a generous person, like I know through your triplets, that's helped you to be involved in the Holy Rollers, right, with Young Life and that whole side of things. Why don't you talk a little bit about that, and how you're passionate about that type of ministry, and then also like the Paralympics that have come from this journey?
Yes. So when I think we had reached maybe junior high age with the triplets, and Megan is probably at a 6-month ability with her physical movement, which means she needs full care. She can't sit up on her own, roll over on her own. She needs full care for dressing, hygiene, eating, etc. And Michelle is ambulatory, but walks with a gait that's been impacted. Well, in 7th and 8th grade, where we meet somebody that's running Young Life, and they said, "Oh, you should take Megan and Michelle to like our week-long camp." And I'm thinking, Megan needs so much care. I care for her so well, like showering, restrooming, all the dailiness that's involved. And they say, "Oh no, we'll pair her one-on-one with a counselor, and it'll be like the best experience." And the ministry was called High Rollers. I think they might even call it Capernaum now for Young Life. But because I trusted this leader, I said, okay, I'll give it a try. So I met these 2 young gals in their 20s. I let Megan get on this handicap accessible bus, and off they went, like 2 hours to a Young Life camp. And I was just so, as mama bears, we just want to care for the kids. Yes. And there they went. So 3 days into it, Megan calls and she says, "Mom, I'm dancing with boys." And they were doing like, what is the country western, dancing with a thing. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like she wants to live an independent life, just like all of us. And she just needs different supports to get there. Mm-hmm. But that kind of set us on a trajectory of meeting all types of beautiful families that have Down syndrome kids, that have autistic kids, that have kids with cerebral palsy and other special needs. And I just saw, from getting that first diagnosis, where I felt like the wind was taken out of my life, to think that my daughter might not walk, to seeing these beautiful families that also got news that wasn't what they expected. And yet the beauty and the simplicity, it's honestly my favorite thing to do all week. Megan is still in a group that's at our local church now as a 30-year-old with young adults. It's my favorite part of the week because it's such a loving and accepting. They don't look at the outside exterior of profession or what you look like. They see the heart. They love deeper. Mm-hmm. And so I guess God took something that was maybe what I thought was like the worst news of my life and has turned it into something that's really beautiful.
That's so well said. And I should also mention for the listeners, my full-time job now that I just started a couple of months ago is with the National Christian Foundation. And we help people set up giving funds. And we have over 71,000 nonprofits and organizations that people can give to. I'm based in San Diego. And I can't tell you like how many amazing people I keep meeting through this job who've set up their own nonprofit based on whatever has happened in their life that they didn't anticipate. Maybe it's losing a child, or someone else is really passionate, long story, about clean water. Someone else is passionate about traveling and with women for a purpose and raising money for anti-sex trafficking. So just how all the different things that shape us in our lives and our journeys, none of us when we were 20 years old could write down, what those things would be. But just like you said, now this is the favorite part of your week. And it's so beautiful of how, God has allowed that and set that up for you. Can you also tell the listeners a little bit about, like, job-wise, career-wise, how your background in health sciences, it led you to your role with the Daniel Plan, and then what you're doing right now with your group called Rise? Because I think that's super encouraging also for women, because maybe a woman's listening and she's working part-time. Maybe she's fully out of the workforce, taking care of a newborn. Like, everyone obviously is at a different point, but I love to see just sort of the through line in your life of you've always had a passion in this area and it's helped you personally, but you've also used your own knowledge because you want to share it and help others as well.
Yeah, I had such a transformative experience during that year and a half period of totally seeing my health transformed. And then it was just a few years later that I was asked in such a humble moment to direct the Daniel Plan at Saddleback Church. And we were only like maybe 3 weeks in when Pastor Rick called me and said, "Hey, would you like to come and lead this for a year? We already have 12,000 people signed up." And I had no idea we were going to hit such a felt need within our community.
And explain more, Dee, what I should have done that. Sorry, but the Daniel Plan, to explain what that is to everybody.
Yes. It was a holistic health ministry that generated out of Saddleback Church, and Pastor Rick Warren asked a few really amazing world-renowned doctors to come and lay the foundation of a year-long program to get healthy. He felt the church did such a good job with spiritual health, with financial health, marital health, how to have a great ministry and contribution, but that he wanted to come alongside and also say, and if you're looking to improve your physical health, let's start there, because then you can have the energy and vitality to go back and do all these other things that God is calling you to. So we launched the ministry. He asked Dr. Mehmet Oz, Dr. Mark Hyman, a functional medicine expert out of the Cleveland Clinic, Dr. Daniel Amen, who runs the Amen's clinics throughout the United States, to be our founding doctors. We launched a 6-week study, but we got 12,000 people from all over the world participating. Amazing. So I jumped in, and I think from my own story, my background in health science, from college, and then meeting these doctors, that was like, oh my gosh, it's not only possible to prevent disease. I was always really into prevention, but what I learned from my years in the Daniel Plan is it's also possible to reverse chronic illness. You just do a few of those small steps, like you talked about the journey and like, let's just take another step. But those small steps, I just want to say, honestly, for everyone listening, they lead to remarkable results to transform your health. So maybe somebody listening is having some chronic issues with migraine, things that are stress related. Maybe it's a weight issue, or it's a cholesterol issue, or blood pressure, or stress, or anxiety, or all of it. They're all related. They are all related to lifestyle approaches. And as you start making a few changes with just a little bit of movement, a little bit of sacred time in the morning with your spiritual connection, a little bit of looking at food, of things that really nurture and fuel your body versus take away from your body. As you begin to make some small changes in those areas, it's like there becomes a snowball effect of positivity. My decade long with the Daniel Plan, we had a couple 100,000 people from all over the world join us, and we just kept getting back story after story after story. I made these couple changes. This happened. My blood pressure is balanced. This is more balanced. I'm feeling better. I'm sleeping through the night. My stress is mitigated. My blood work is better. It's absolutely phenomenal. And I feel like just knowing that we can start small, it also makes it doable. We don't have to tackle the whole hill in one day and become like a raw vegan chef that's running the luxury spots, right? As women, we can just do some small things. Like you said, start with drinking some water, start with doing some deep breathing for the stress. Look at your pantry a little bit different and say, hey, from here on out, I'm just going to start looking at foods that might actually energize my life, and just begin to make some small changes. And of course, the fitness piece. If you just start super small with that, a little bit of a walk, a little bit of stretching, a shoulder roll, some deep breathing, your body starts really picking up the momentum.
Mm-hmm. Well, even going back to that half marathon when we did that, you've been definitely more of a runner over your lifetime than I have. I had done some just recreational running like in high school and college. But when we tried that half marathon, I remember following that plan of going from literally zero running, doing other, workout classes, but no running at that point, and how your body is resilient. And within 12 weeks, we were ready to run that, Huntington Beach Marathon. And it amazed me. And it was, the kids all cheering for us at the end of their moms finishing. But really that to me was just how it just spoke to me about how the body, it's not static, but it is adaptable and changeable, and cells are growing, and it's just kind of a living organism. And we've got one body and we're always, in each decade as we age, you're dealing with different things. Maybe it's hormonal, or maybe it's pregnancies, or wherever a person is at on that spectrum. But I want to encourage the listener to have hope, and that to have hope that you might be frustrated and you've tried everything you feel like, but hopefully by hearing Dee's story, you're going to, you're finishing this podcast feeling like, no, I can take the next step, whatever that step is. So let me ask you, I remember in terms of even like the financial generosity component side of things, I remember the story of you raising money for, was it leukemia, when you did a marathon run in Hawaii?
It was the American Heart Association.
American Heart Association. Okay. And so, that's also an example where you were able to marry your passion of exercise and working out, but then people supported you and then donated the money toward the American Heart Association. Do you have any other areas that you and your husband are passionate about now, that like philanthropically you love to give to, or anything you want to encourage the listeners with in that regard?
Well, for us, I think it's just following your heart and things that you're interested in. It's so nice to be able to give back, to volunteer your time or your treasure or both, to things that are meaningful. There's an organization in our area called Dear Mom, and it's for mothers of Down syndrome kids that I'm really loving. Megan's Summit group for young adults with special needs. And then most recently, we've been introduced to the sport of Paralympic for surfing. And this is through my daughter, Michelle, who has cerebral palsy, but is able-bodied. She's more moderately affected. And she called us one day, this is back in March of this year. Now, mind you, she knows how to swim a little bit and she's never surfed. And she says, I want to get your opinion. You can understand a little bit about Michelle's personality just by the story. I want to get your opinion if you think I should compete in the World Paralympic competition this March in Pismo Beach. And I said, in surfing. And I said, oh, well, I don't know how to surf. And so I'm not sure. And she said, but you don't want to squelch any motivation of any of your kids, right? So I'm kind of listening. And she says, well, they need 20 people on their team, and they have 18 competitive surfers that are all involved with some type of Paralympic. It's Paralympic, so they have some type of issue physically. She said, but they get points just for people being on their team. The competition was 3 weeks away. So they said, even if I'm brand new, but I can just get in the water, we'll get additional points for having a full team, even if I can just swim out and come back in, even if I don't even completely catch a wave. And I said, well, what do you think about that? She said, I think I want to try it. So we just got into the pool. My husband, just trying to put a wetsuit on if you have cerebral palsy. What might be a 15-minute experience is now a 45-minute ordeal, So getting the wetsuit, getting her comfortable in the water. We put the surfboard in our pool, in our condo complex, just to try to get on and off the board, on and off the board. Yeah. Then we went to Doheny, which is a local place that has moderate waves.
Right.
First go out there. My husband went out there with her, and she learned to, with CP, it's harder. Your body tightens up and is more spastic. So when the water's cold, her body's going to react even much differently and make it more challenging than for the rest of us. Mm-hmm. bottom line, for 3 weeks she tried it. I have never felt my heart so much when she swam out at Pismo Beach. 27 countries are represented.
So amazing.
Athletes with one limb, missing 2 limbs, that have been in the military, that have been in a ski accident, a motorcycle accident, cerebral palsy, just the most amazing people on earth. And I say, when God is writing out each of our stories and writing us so uniquely, the picture of resilience and being able to overcome. I mean, I'm sentimental now just thinking of those beautiful people competing. And Michelle got to be one of them. And she went out there through the pylons of the pier, and she was in the kneeling division. And she caught a couple waves in, and we had the American flag. And but, I think it just makes me feel like we're all in this together. Yeah. None of our stories are exactly what we thought they were going to be.
Right.
And yet these small steps to live a more balanced life, an energized life, a generous life, to be a generous giver of our time, our talent, our treasure, of Michelle learning how to give back in the midst of all those challenges. Yeah, so the Paralympics are high on our scope. This Saturday, we have an event in Coronado with a couple of the athletes. And it's just, I guess it's so nice to see how we can all turn things that are difficult into a thing of beauty, that we can do it by supporting one another, building our lives on a foundation of faith, and these pillars that you really have as part of your job, Kim, is really very, very inspiring and motivating.
Oh, well, and I, with your family and my family being at Saddleback for so long, I remember Rick's phrase about, when difficult things come our way, are we going to allow it to make us bitter or better? And we each are faced with that fork in the road. And, I know you have always been that inspiration for me when things have been challenging. And I thought, wow, look what Dee has on an everyday basis that she's going through. And you've given me that encouragement to take the next step and keep going. And you're talking about seeing these Paralympic athletes and them taking that next step. If they can do it, you can do whatever God has put in front of your story to take that next step. So, well, I know we're about out of time, but I just wanted to wrap up with a few last questions. I always love to know, any book you're reading that you'd recommend for a woman to want to read, or a bargain that you've just recently had that you've got to share, because you know me, I love bargains. And then finally, if there's any lifelong verse in the Bible that's your encouragement, and then we'll wrap up.
Okay, great. Well, perfect. Well, it's been so nice to be with you. I brought 2 books out that are the one that I'm reading that's on my bedstand right now it's called Bittersweet, How Sorrow and Longing Makes Us Whole. And I thought it was so nice. It's Susan Cain. It's brand new. And she comes at it kind of from a Brene Brown approach, where she does scientific research and just brings you all these perspectives of how we really assimilate grief and loss, and how ultimately it can make us whole. It's not a Pollyanna type book. It's just, I have been finding it really inspiring. I thought it would be fun, since I've been talking about hey, one thing I'd love you to take away is small steps really equal remarkable results. It's never too late to start. Tiny is mighty. All of that is one of my favorite authors, BJ Fogg. He's out of Stanford, and it's called Tiny Habits, the Small Changes That Change Everything. So I think I just want to say, for those of you listening and might just say, hey, I think I'd love to change one thing. I'd love to feel more energized in this area, or I'd love to know how to deal with this stress in my life. And I'd love to kind of move forward a little differently here, just to know that these tiny habits really make significant results. And if you want a book to kind of guide you through some of that, BJ Fogg's Tiny Habits is very informative and inspirational. Yes. Okay. So those are my books. I guess for a bargain, Megan just recently had foot surgery, was in a cast for 8 weeks, and I needed some really flowy pants for her to fit over the cast. And I just Googled on Amazon, workout wear bell bottom and lounge wear bell bottom. I found these pants for $16. Lululemon, they would have been $116.
Right.
And they were so nice. They were high-waisted. They had the crisscross waistband. They were so comfy. I ordered but they were like $16. And it was really fun to feel like I could get something really quality. They were comfortable and they were super cute. So I'm thinking of buying a few pair for myself.
Okay, so type in Amazon and high-waisted bell-bottom pants for the listener.
Yes.
Okay. And then what about any verse? I remember Journey. We did Romans 8, right?
Yes. I would say probably, I think it's Romans 12:2 about being transformed by the renewing of your mind. I think just by plugging into podcasts like yours, hearing other stories, realizing that we can base our life and be renewed by our mind, we can transform the way we live just by a little bit of the way we think. Mm-hmm. And that's always been deeply meaningful to me. And I find that working in this field of health, that it's really transformative.
Yeah, because our mind is how we see everything and how we make our choices. And we can tell ourselves something that's sometimes not the truth too, and believe a lie, and that it causes us to act accordingly. So I think that's a perfect way to end. And the last question, Dee, is what is the name of your RISE program and website?
Yeah, we do health coaching online. We have a group that goes on monthly coaching. We do 10-day detoxes. We do a 30-day RISE reset, and it's RISE Together Today. So if you're ever looking for any extra encouragement in the area of health, feel free to check it out.
Perfect. Okay, and we'll have all these links in the show notes. But it's just been a massive privilege, as always, being with you. I just love you dearly, and thank you so much for sharing your story with all of our listeners.
I love you so much, Kim. It's really a blessing and an honor. So thank you so much for including me.
You're welcome. God bless.
God bless you. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thanks so much for joining us today on the Generous Girl podcast. We're so glad that you're here. And if you know of someone that you think needs to be a guest on this podcast, please reach out to us. New episodes are released every other week, and you can follow us on YouTube and on all platforms. Thanks for being here, and we'll see you next time.